Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. Chairman, esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. I guess I'm going to approach tonight's topic a little bit different from YB Hanifa and Sharizan, because I guess what was being mentioned by YB just now was nothing new. I thought I came here to learn something new, that he had some hidden bullets that should be very incisive to say that hudud must be implemented in Kelantan. But I was surprised somehow. In which way? Let's go, because could you just switch on my slide, please? I would like to reiterate what he said, which is true, that this is the version of political Islam, that Islam is ad-din wa dawlah, right? Islam is a deen and also a government, right? And because of that, PAS wanted to implement hudud. And I said in my first slide that hudud is basically what we call the raison d'etre of PAS, right? Means that, you understand the meaning of the word raison d'etre? Yeah, second one, please. Could you switch on the light, and this one easier for people to have a look at it? Yeah, now, because it's the raison d'etre of PAS, of course, PAS has the right to promote its agenda, that is hudud and Islamic State. I believe that it can be done within a democratic society, which is like Malaysia, right? And I don't have any qualms if PAS wanted to promote its agenda, right? I'm not going to talk about politics regarding buku jingga and so on and so forth, because he's a politician and he knows more than me. But the thing is that what I'm trying to say is that PAS, while promoting its agenda, is trying to silence the Muslim dissidents and also the non-Muslims by saying that hudud is a divine law that no Muslim can question and hence is inevitable. If you're Muslim, you cannot question, right? Then you become murtad, then you become, kafir. And if you are non-Muslim, why do you care? It doesn't involve you, right? So that is the rationale of PAS. PAS is trying to silence both. Silence the Muslim dissidents and silence the non-Muslims. In the end, they hold what they call the ultimate truth, and this is divine. Right, something divine that cannot be questioned. Now I challenge that percept. Is it really divine? I say no, it is not. While some articles of what we consider as hudud or PAS understand as hudud, for example, can be found in the Quran, but there are many articles in the Kelantan hudud law, hudud bill, for example, that do not have any basis in the Quran itself. For example, he mentioned just now, he gave a lecture on what hudud is all about. So I want to quote, for example, apostasy. Was there a penal code or a hudud for apostasy in the Quran? No. Probably not many of you realize this, but there is none. No punishment for apostasy in the Quran. Similarly, there is no punishment for adultery in the Quran, right? There is no punishment for adultery in the Quran. Now we have this bill being passed by Kelantan, and yet they say this is divine. This is from God. So to me, it is basically what you call work of people to interpret God's laws in the Quran. Yes, nothing more than that. It is merely interpretation of human beings that that uses our agency, our mental agency. All right, and you have to understand that this concept of divinity is the one that says, that gives basically credit to certain rulers. That's why we see that even some sultans, corrupt sultans in our country and elsewhere, they want hudud as well, right? Because it gives a sense of legitimacy for them, which I'm going to touch on my last slide on that, okay? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, before that, get back to the first slide. Yeah, one more point. And when they wanted to silence the non-Muslims, right? First, the Muslims you cannot question because you'll be kafir. The non-Muslims cannot talk because it has nothing to do with you, right? That was their argument. Nothing concerns them. We are going to implement this on Muslims, not on non-Muslims. Now I say that that is wrong. Why? You look at a paper being presented by a former Chief Justice, Tun Abdul Hamid Muhammad. This paper was presented on the 11th of February this year, and I was present when this paper was presented at IAIS, International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies in KL, near UM, just beside UM. He said, why that, it is wrong to say that, this law, the laws will be applicable only to Muslims, because criminal law is not personal law or offences relating to precepts of Islam, as provided by List 2, State List 9 Schedule of the Federal Constitution. We quoted this in our statement this morning, right? Criminal law is a public law. The offences are offences against the state, not just against the victim. That is why it is the public prosecutor who prosecutes on behalf of the state. That is why we have AG, right? Because it's a crime against the state. It's not a crime against another person, right? Now, you have to be clear about it. So, the non-Muslims, of course they have a voice to say, right, about this. You cannot silence them because they're involved as well. And secondly, just like what Sharizan said about our Article 8, of course it was against Article 8. Article 8, which is about what you call equality, right? So basically, it is, if you confine it for the Muslims only, it will become inconsistent with Article 8 of the Federal Constitution, as it is a discrimination on ground of religion, one religion, and therefore unconstitutional, null and void, right? Because there is no equality, and equality is there, is there on Article 8. Of course, ISMA in their manifesto, they don't believe really in equality in their manifesto, and nobody makes any sound on that. Yeah, I was surprised. Okay, and of course the third, which was being mentioned by Sharizan, I won't go into that. All right. So I guess that's the first point, that why pass as the psyche that hudud must be implemented in this country, right? Okay. What's the second one? Next slide, please. Second one is the psyche, and we have heard this all over the country. Hudud could reduce crime rate. So people believe, and the past proponents believe, that by implementing hudud, we could reduce the crime rate. My question is, does hudud really reduce the crime rate? Does it reduce the crime rate? Now, look back at this paper by Chief Justice, alright? Paper by Chief Justice mentioned, you can just Google, go to Tun Abdul Hamid's site and Google for this full paper, right? It's a 12-page paper. He said that there is no data whatsoever to support the idea that hudud will reduce crime rate. There is no data. Nothing. Not a single data. Alright? And I want to quote this. In an article written by Aminu Adamu Bello from Faculty of Law, University of Abuja, Nigeria, titled Enforcement of Hudud Punishment under Islamic Law in Nigeria, Implication for Plural Legal System. As you know, Nigeria is almost similar to us. The author stated that data do not support an assertion that the enforcement of hudud penalties has had any effect on the nature of antisocial behavior, especially armed robbery or hiraba, in the States, right? And of course, I want to basically comment a little bit about what YB mentioned, that the standard of proof in Hudud is very high, right? So it's very difficult for people to be prosecuted. Well, I would say that the problem with the implementation of this kind of law is that, like Mufti Taqi Usmani, right, former Chief Justice of Pakistan, mentioned, in a case of rape, for example, right, there is not a single case where the perpetrator was being prosecuted, but the victim was being prosecuted. Why? Because they could not come up with 4 witnesses. It's as simple as that. And then you say there is justice? Of course it is not justice. Right? So this is the main problem that we are having. And people are propagating this, and as you know, that rape is not in Hudud, under Hudud law. Right? It's what he said just now. Clearly it was basically zina. Now that is the problem. Right? Not a single case, okay, in Pakistan, and that was by the former Chief Justice Taqi Usmani. So, and secondly, I would like to say, because this point about reducing the crime rate, also we have to understand that YB mentioned, the problem with the implementation is because it's being implemented by a state like Malaysia, not Norway. I would like to counter that by saying there is no reason for Norway to implement Hudud. For Netherlands, for example, they close their prisons. Nobody is doing any crime. They have closed prisons in that country. And in Norway, what is the type of prison do you have? It's an open prison in an island, with full facilities. Open prison in an island. Because they're thinking of correction. They're not thinking of punishment. Not like some mentality of us, they would like to cut people's hand and stone people to death. Okay, next one please. Now look at the safest country in the world. Next one, yeah, okay. This was the latest, okay, 2014. The safest country in the world, the first would be New Zealand, the second Denmark, the third Norway, the fourth Iceland, the fifth Austria. If you look at the 10th most safest countries, none in Islamic countries that practice hudud. Okay, get that point? None, okay? Now, my next point is that how is based on this paper, which I want to talk with, not just talk like rhetoric and things like that. Let's have some substance, okay, and evidence. So my evidence is that I have 2 papers over here which I'm going to give to Yonglin later on. This paper by researchers from the George Washington University, published in the Global Economic Journal, Volume 10. Okay, in 2010, how Islamic are Islamic countries. So it was a very long paper, about 36 pages altogether. So basically they had a formula and calculate the formula. Basically they look at the indices based on 4 sub-indices: the economics, the legal and governance, human and political rights, and international relations. Next please. Now, if you look at the Islamicity Index, okay, I square is the Islamicity Index. It's basically the economic Islamicity Index squared plus legal and governance Islamicity Index plus human and political rights Islamicity Index plus international relations Islamicity Index. This was a very comprehensive study. Now, you are going to be surprised with this. Next one, please. Alright. If you look at this Islamicity Index, which country do you think that would have the first ranking? New Zealand. Just the same country, the safest country in the world just now. So I want to say to PAS, rather than spending thousands of dollars to send delegates to Brunei to learn about Hudud, why don't you send people to New Zealand to learn about how to manage a government? So if you look at it, it concludes, this paper, the long paper concludes that the adoption and implementation of such a system respects human rights, social and economic justice. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Social and economic justice, hard work, equal opportunity for all to develop, absence of corruption, absence of waste and hoarding, ethical business practices, well-functioning markets. These are all good governance, okay? A legitimate political authority should result in flourishing economics. If you talk about good governance, your economy will flourish. Yeah? Not by putting a label as Rambi Mekah, but then you have rats as big as cakes in the markets. This teaching is not the actual practice of those who are labeled as Muslims should be the basis for judging a society's pretensions to Islamicity. Next please. So the results show that Islamic countries are not as Islamic in their practice as one might expect. Instead, it appears that the most developed countries tend to place higher on our preliminary Islamicity index. Of course, it was a preliminary study. Yeah, next please. So the conclusion from this paper was that it is our belief that most self-declared and labeled Islamic countries are not conducting their affairs in accordance with Islamic teachings, at least when it comes to economic, financial, political, legal, social and governance policies. Next please. So you look at this ranking, okay? The first is New Zealand, the second is Luxembourg, the third is Ireland, the fourth is Iceland, the fifth is Finland. And where is your so-called Islamic country that amputate people's hand and decapitate people's head? Number 131. During my debate with Muda UMNO in UIA 2 years ago, I guess, like when the moderator asked, can you give an example of an Islamic state? Your Islamic state, your version of Islamic state. He came up and said, well, Saudi Arabia. There, Saudi Arabia at 131. Yeah, that's Ulama UMNO, yeah. So, okay, my stand. Now, let's go to my stand. Come, next one, please. This is my stand, okay? My personal stand. It must be understood loud and clear that the eternal message of Islam is justice and equality. The severity of Sharia can only be understood if one bears in mind that the fundamental principle of Islamic law, no duty, okay, or what we call in Arabic as taklif, is ever imposed on a man without his being granted a corresponding right. So you cannot say, oh, you have to do this, but you are denying the rights of a person or a citizen. Next one, please. And among these inalienable rights of every member of society, Muslim and non-Muslim, okay, this is not in Mawardi time when they have this kafir harbi and kafir zimmi and whatsoever, right? Now we are all citizens, equal citizens of our country. Is the right to protection by the community as a whole. Next. Hence, the application of Sharia penalties are almost never applicable. Take this message home. The application of Sharia penalties are almost never applicable in a modern society where inequality is clearly abundant. What is the Gini coefficient? Anybody learn economy here? You understand about Gini coefficient, right? Yes. What is the Gini coefficient of this country? We have a very wide economic disparity, and yet we want to implement hudud? It just doesn't make sense. So Sharia penalties serve as a deterrent with the objective to steer the conscience of the believer to gravity of the action warranting such a punishment. That is the most important fact that you have to understand, that it acts as a deterrent. Right? The severity acts as a deterrent. It is not the severity of punishment itself. Okay, next. So it would have been a grave injustice when these penalties are applied to women and poor and never to the wealthy, the powerful and the oppressors. These were basically the stand of Tariq Ramadan, Professor Tariq Ramadan, when he wrote a thesis asking for moratorium of hudud in the Islamic world. My last slide, okay, my challenge to pass. Your idea is here. I say there is no need to convince the Chinese and non-Muslims that they will not be subjected to hudud laws. But to me, you have to voice out to the kings, the sultans and the Malay rulers that they are not spared from hudud punishment and they will be subjected to these laws as well, just like their subjects. Thank you.